Okay, we're on. It's December 2nd, 2015, and we passed out an agenda. First on the agenda tonight is to discuss issues surrounding wetlands at the Carpenter property. Jim Gove has been nice enough to come here tonight to describe the wetlands on Carpenter. He brought some drawings with him, and just start out by thanking him for coming and for his time. Appreciate it, Jim. So why don't you take it away?
Well, I always do better standing up when I do these things, so I guess I will. My name is Jim Gove. I'm with Gove Environmental Services, and back in 2011, I had Lindsay O'Reilly from my office go out and delineate these wetlands. And first, let's just talk a little bit about wetlands in general. There are all kinds of wetlands, right? There are forested wetlands, there are the kind of wetlands of marshes where you expect the ducks to fly into and that sort of thing. And there are wetlands that have certain significance and other wetlands that aren't so significant. And so these particular wetlands, the reason I did the aerial photo is essentially so you could see what is surrounding these wetlands. I mean, you have a residential subdivision here, you have a residential subdivision here, you have a road and more residential development along this road, and of course you have the school to the south of it. So, in essence, just the very proximity of development around it sort of starts to set the function and value of these kind of wetlands. They are forested for the most part. There are some shrub areas. There's also an open field area that's growing in over in this region. And they are not what one would consider to be wetlands of like special significance. They aren't prime wetlands. But they're still wetlands, and they're still, in order to impact them, you need to get a permit from the state of New Hampshire. And there's also a local setback to them as well, which I think it's 40 feet, as I recall. Some of the other questions that came up with regard to this is the age of the delineation. Delineations typically are good for about 5 years. And in part, it's just because of the fact that if you actually went out there to try to find the flags again, sometimes some are missing, some aren't. You can't always read the tags, but it's actually mandated by the Corps of Engineers if you were getting a wetlands permit, that you actually have a fresh delineation every 5 years. So that's a little bit of a reason why I was talking about the fact that, you're kind of coming to the end of the age of this delineation. The other aspect of that is that this was done in 2011, and things change. New standards come out, and in fact in 2012 a new standard came out from the Corps of Engineers, and it's a new delineation manual. It updates their old manual from 1987. It's a regional manual, and the state of New Hampshire has adopted it as well. So that is the current standard of delineation, and it's a little bit different. I don't think significantly so, but it's a little bit different than what was done in the past. So if we talk about, I took a walk out there. It was a little bit rainy today, but I took a walk out there. And I don't know, I don't think there have been any encroachments. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened out there? I see all the buildings are gone. I see it's kind of been graded down. I see it's been flattened out. Is that, and as far as the wells are concerned, I have no idea what the wells were put in for.
Really?
So yeah, those wells were something that were done at a different time and I don't. It's interesting. They don't look like typical deep monitoring wells. They look like a very shallow monitoring well. So I really don't know what the monitoring wells are for. I and I don't want to say this definitively either, but I think there may also have been some encroachment along this side right here, where some of the grading took place into this wetland edge, which is not things happen, all right, and probably a lot of these flags were missing, but I think there may have been a little bit of encroachment along this side here. I did see one old flag tag standing there, and I saw on the tree, and like the fill went around it like that. So it kind of an indication to me that probably there might have been some encroachment here. And it's again, it's not anything to have anybody slash their wrists over or anything like that.
But should that be something that the people who did the work were aware of?
Well, it depends on whether they were aware of it or not. I don't know who did the work. I don't know what plans they had to go by. I have a feeling that in this area, because it looked to me like it was more of a shrub area, that it probably quite likely a lot of the flags might have been gone. But again, from the standpoint, these things happen, and I say I don't want to say definitively that anything happened. It would be a matter of actually taking like this plan and then having Doucette or another surveyor just look at this edge to see whether or not there's been encroachment along this side. And quite frankly, the DES wetlands folks are usually pretty understanding of these things, and oftentimes it's just a matter of a simple restoration, or if in fact you have a plan that you're moving forward with which might need some wetland impact, then that's something that can be discussed with them.
Jim, is that a recommendation on your part that at least, whether it's the committee or the school board, follow up and find out?
It would be my recommendation that it would be good to know whether or not any kind of encroachments have occurred out here. And yes, I would think that would be a good idea.
To do that, if I, just while we're on the point, Jim, to do that, do you think we need to do a reflagging of the perimeter?
Well, it's actually two separate issues, okay? You have a wetland delineation right now, whether the flags are up there or not, that is still within the time frame and was still done to the standards at that time, which are accurate. I mean, and so I don't necessarily want you to incur a lot of extra cost, but at some point, you may want to have at least that boundary on the plan reestablished so that you can actually know where the wetland boundary is out there. Some of the places are very obvious, like for instance, out in the back here, there's actually a fill slope out in the back here. So when you walk out here, you can actually see where it just, at some point, there would have been old fill put back there, and it just kind of drops right off. You can actually see the boundary relatively easily. Over here in this old field area, it's a little more difficult to discern, especially where I'm sure the flags over in that area have been lost. It's actually two separate issues, though. One is the issue of whether or not there's been any encroachment, and that would be a matter of just having to see where the fill line out there, whether that encompasses any of this area. And then the second issue is whether or not the actual flagging needs to be reestablished. And it's all really dependent upon what the plans are and what the layout is. Let's just say that you do have a layout that may encroach on wetlands, whatever plans you have, whatever school is there, and so, or whatever facility you want to put there. The first aspect is being able to describe the avoidance and minimization of that. In other words, it is not so much the value of the wetlands. It certainly plays into it, but it is first off the question, do you need that wetland impact? All right, so in other words, what your layout is, and I certainly am fully aware, having done a number of schools, that, you know, if you put a school there, there are certain things that have to go with it. There are certain recreational facilities that have to go with it. There's a certain amount of parking that has to go with it. And it's certainly dependent upon that type of, that the facility and what is required by the state as far as you know, the education department, what you actually are required to have. I know there's a certain number of athletic fields required and that sort of thing. So in a way, the first aspect, the first cut, is to see what can be put on here and whether you can move things around to avoid wetland impacts. If in fact you find that it is a necessity, I mean, that is really the basis of this, the necessity to have a wetland impact. And so then you would actually look at it and say, okay, so where functionally the better wetlands versus the less valuable wetlands out there. And typically, the stuff that you look at first is the stuff that had been like an old agricultural areas, like over here, as opposed to the areas that have come back into forested conditions. Remember, all of this 100 years ago was flattened. All of this 100 years ago was essentially in agriculture. And these trees that are coming up here are essentially coming back into agricultural fields. If you actually take a walk out through here, you'll actually see all the old rows that are out in there. And a whole bedding system that was put in out there, and that was done because it was in agriculture. Whether it was, you know, it might have been just grass. More likely, it was some kind of vegetable crop. But so you then look at functionally what is going on here, and the lesser value wetlands would be sort of in this area, and the more valuable wetlands would be on site, on this portion of the site over here. So in terms of if in fact you do have a direct wetland impact, the next question comes up is, well, is there going to be compensatory mitigation? And one of the things that is sort of, you know, a lot of folks would like to think that, you know, schools and state agencies and town agencies should kind of get a buy on the compensatory mitigation thing. Well, you don't. Okay, it's just you're treated just like every other person who owns a piece of land. And in fact, even the Department of Transportation, with all of their things going on, they have an entire Bureau of the Environment that just does essentially follow-up permitting and follow-up compensatory mitigation, or they pay into the Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund. So first off, let's talk a little bit about when you actually get a trigger of wetland mitigation. And that is at 10,000 square feet of direct wetland impact. Now, remember that the state of New Hampshire has no buffers, all right, on wetlands. The only buffers they have are on prime wetlands or on the tidal buffer zone. There's certainly setbacks for septic systems, and that's a different issue. But as far as like putting a building, like for instance, you can see the old greenhouse. Putting the building right there is perfectly legal from the standpoint of the state of New Hampshire. So the buffers associated with wetlands are a local issue, and they aren't a state issue in this case. And I know you've heard a lot of talk, perhaps, about buffers to vernal pools and that sort of thing. And by the way, we did a vernal pool study out here. We found no vernal pools. But that is also a different level of permitting. That's actually the Corps of Engineers who do those things.
And you said you thought it was 40 feet in Newmarket was?
I think it's 40 feet, but I could be wrong. So I honestly did not bother. I'm sorry. I go to so many towns. I probably should have looked up on the website, but I forgot. So, so in essence, if you have a direct wetland impact and it's less than 10,000 square feet, there is no compensatory mitigation at the state level. So that's why you kind of look at, in terms of some of these places, whether or not you just need a little bit of impact in order to make the whole program work. If you go over 10,000 square feet of direct wetland impact, that's when you get into compensatory mitigation. And compensatory mitigation actually takes 4 different forms, okay? So the first one would be actual compensatory mitigation by creation of a wetland either on-site or off-site. This is not easy to do. This is not an easy thing by any means to create a wetland. First off, you have to have an appropriate site, and you just can't go into the trees someplace and start digging a hole. It has to be an appropriate site hydrologically, and there is this long-term monitoring aspect associated with it. In other words, there's at least 5 to 10 years of monitoring that is required for a wetland creation site to make sure it effectively works. And if it doesn't work, then the applicant is responsible to go back in there and make it work. Whether it's maybe the hole got too, I use the term hole, maybe the area got dug too deep, so it actually floods and kills all the trees that were planted there, or maybe it wasn't, the hydrology wasn't accurately done, so it's too dry, and so all of the wetland shrubs that are there dry up and die, and so it is something which I really seriously try to keep clients away from doing, but it is an option. The next of the 4, second of the 4 is, and this is in no particular order, all right? The second of the 4 is wetland restoration. And in some cases, wetland restoration is a lot easier because essentially you're doing things to an area which was established once as a wetland, and so it's sort of easier to kind of bring it back. And wetland restoration includes things like stream bank stabilization. In some cases, it actually includes changing culvert sizes to just simply make it more, allow better fish passage. But typically, I brought that up, but typically it's more like in-kind restoration. So in other words, what you're doing is you're impacting like either forested or scrub shop, woody type of the swamp type of and so typically you don't get that kind of mitigation for like stream bank restoration, for instance. Yes?
Would this be all located, the first 2 options at least, on that property itself or elsewhere?
No, they can be off-site. It
So
can either be on-site or off-site. Correct.
Okay, so you could do it there, or
Yes.
you can have another piece of land
Yes.
you would turn into a
Right.
wetland? Okay.
The third option, which a lot of people, especially communities, find very attractive, is preservation. And that is essentially finding an area that's both a wetland upland complex that is has high function and value, and then actually putting it into a form of preservation, typically conservation easement. Now, ideally, you'd want it to have more function and value than the wetlands that you're impacting. And so, in essence, you'd be looking at something that may have like a combination of open water habitat, forested habitat, might be associated with a stream, and has this upland wetland component. You can't protect just wetland, all right? The actual guidelines are that you should you should be protecting, almost a 50-50 mix. You have to have at least 50% upland in this mix, so that you're protecting both the wetland and the upland habitat that might support that wetland. So that's kind of the concept of what you're doing there. And the ratios, and I'm going to give you actually two different ratios here. Once you get into the world of compensatory mitigation, that is when you also end up talking with the Corps of Engineers and the EPA. And the reason that happens is because the state of New Hampshire has an agreement with the Corps of Engineers. It's called a state programmatic general permit. And this general permit gets reissued every 5 years. We're on a 5th cycle? I think so. So anyway, so the point being is that the agreement that is between the federal agencies that oversee the 404 program, and the 404 program is the Federal Clean Water Act, and there are sections of the Clean Water Act. The Section 404 deals with wetlands, all right? Not like Section 10 that deals with navigable waterways and the Great Bay and stuff like that. No, this is 404, and so the Corps of Engineers, the EPA oversees it. The Corps of Engineers administrates it, and they work jointly with under the state programmatic general permit with the Department of Environmental Services. So when you get into the world of compensatory mitigation, you will in fact be discussing the mitigation with both the Department of Environmental Services, typically the mitigation specialist Lori Sommer, who was up there at DES in Concord, and you'd also be talking with the Corps of Engineers, perhaps Dave Cadell or Rich Christiniak, and then you'll certainly be talking with Mark Curran from the EPA. And they have input into the compensatory mitigation because the whole concept for them is that, all right, it's a bean count. All right, that's, if you go back far enough to the first President Bush, there was basically an edict that came out that said there will be no net loss of wetlands, all right? There's not been a single president yet has ever changed that. Well, what does that mean, no net loss of wetlands? So under the 404 program, no net loss has to be reflected by some type of compensation, and it sounds like bean counting. Well, it is. They're basically making sure that the beans all add up at the end of the year. That okay, for the wetlands they have allowed to be filled, they have enough beans over here to basically match it, and so they have a formula for upland wetland preservation, and that formula is 15 to 1. All right. Now, if you look at the state of New Hampshire's guidelines, they're 10 to 1. But you can kind of forget about the 10 to 1 because the feds will overrule the state of New Hampshire, and so you're looking at 15 to 1 of compensatory mitigation. So let's say, for instance, you had a direct impact of 1 acre. All right. That would mean you'd have to find at least a 15-acre parcel that has half of it has to be upland. Okay, so that's and I mean functionally it has to be great and all the rest of that stuff, but that's kind of like the minimum standard. Okay, you might find a 30-acre parcel and they'll say great, we'll take it all, but still that being said, that is sort of the standard under which you're looking at. So you're looking at 15 to 1 ratio. That's for that third option of buffer preservation. Okay. Now, fourth option is direct payment into what's called the Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund. And we'll make it simple. It's an ARM fund, okay? But the Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund. What that fund does, and in fact, I just saw, it came out on the DES website about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Was this year's funding through the ARM fund, and you can go look at it for yourself. There were some things done in this watershed. I think there was about $1 million that was passed out in this watershed, and other watersheds had other funds. What they do is you essentially pay into this fund, and then the DES then reviews a whole bunch of potential compensatory mitigations that would provide better protection to either the environment or enhancement to the wetland environment or creation to the wetland environment in the state of New Hampshire. And that same group that looks at that is also overseen by the Corps of Engineers and EPA. They're part of that same group. So like, for instance, Bedford found that, remarkably, they found that in the middle of Bedford, they had a stream that ended up being a cold water fisheries. It was shocking. Basically, the fishing game went out there 3 years ago, and just by sheer accident came across a native brook trout population in the middle of Bedford, New Hampshire. Well, that native brook trout population was being somewhat hampered because of some culverts that were stopping their migration back and forth, and some of the other things. So they have first off, they've actually taken out a dam, and the next funding went through to enhance the size of the culverts, so there's fish passage going on, and to try to protect this native brook trout population. So that's one of the ones that they funded. Another one they funded was establishment of more shellfish areas out here in Great Bay. So there's a whole bunch of different things that Aquatic Resources Mitigation Fund goes to. Payment into this is based upon two things. First off, the amount of direct impact that you have, and secondly, it actually is dependent upon what they call the land evaluation in the town. So in other words, and the whole concept is that there's a base amount of money that needs to be, and it's all based on wetland creation. There's a base amount of money that needs to be paid out for a wetland creation, and that's the basis of the actual funding. So what they figured out is they've used that base number. Base number actually came from the DOT because they had to build a whole bunch of wetlands, and then the management, and then the factoring of the land that you'd have to buy in order to do it. So it's a formula, and the formula is on the website. And so whatever square footage you have, over 10,000 square feet, you can put into that formula, it can spit it out. I actually went to the website before I came here. Unfortunately, the website's down, but I have done this enough times, so I can tell you that on a per acre basis, for 1 acre of impact, it would probably be around $175,000 per acre that would have to be paid into the ARM fund. It's not quite as expensive. I don't mean to be disparaging, but in like Portsmouth or Rye, they would be close to $220,000 in that area. But here it's about, I think it's about 175. Okay. Did I get all four?
Yeah.
I think I did. Okay.
What's the size of the property?
Oh, I don't know.
15 acres.
15 acres
About
total?
15?
Okay.
Including the Rodriguez, I think, was
Okay,
it?
all right.
Including the
And
1 acre of the Rodriguez. had that footprint.
so if we say 15, do you have an estimate from your prior delineation on how much of that land acreage is considered wetland?
Just roughly, and this is just roughly looking at it, it looks to me like probably about a third of this is probably wetland.
Okay.
I've got a number on this,
Oh, good.
on this plan that doesn't have that Rodriguez piece, which is close to where Mark is there, that comes back out to the street, right? But this says, combined area tax map U4 lots 101, 103, and 104, which are along the street, is 15.025 acres. And I believe the Rodriguez piece, if you added it on, when I looked at the deed, was about like 1.03
Yeah, it says
acres.
1.03.
Yeah, so.
That's
that
about
was it.
16 acres is your best guess at
Yeah.
that.
A little over.
And I, according to this map, it's the M3 zone.
Mhm.
And in Newmarket, the M3 zone, the wetland setbacks are 50 feet for very
Oh,
poorly
50 feet.
drained,
Okay.
and 25 for poorly
Okay.
drained.
So that's great. I'm glad you got that, because essentially, that means that this is all poorly drained. All right, I can tell you right now, these are all poorly drained. They aren't very poorly drained. That's one of the things that came out of Lindsay's analysis.
So up in the left-hand part or all the wetlands are?
Oh, no, she did not find any very poorly drained out there at all.
Did not?
Did not, no.
They're all 25 feet setback.
They're all 25 feet setback, right. Yep,
Question, Jim.
yep.
In terms of impact, if there's a 25-foot setback, for instance, and you come right up to the edge of that, does that mean you've, like say you're right on the line, does that mean you've encroached 25%?
No.
25
See,
25 feet?
See, that's the thing. The setback is a local issue,
Yeah.
okay? And so it does not factor into the state permitting at all. In other words, you could come within 3 feet of that boundary, and you would not have a wetlands permit that you would need to apply for. Okay, I mean, it's just strictly, it is just strictly the local setback, and and that would be just a local issue. It would-
Which means that the wetlands are 25 feet larger than the mapping. In other words, of usable land. You'd have to add a 25-foot perimeter all the way around those wetlands, and that would be land that you couldn't build on.
And if that's true, and I recognize we're asking you to generate these numbers, but what percentage impact, if you're saying, and I'm not holding you to it, I'm just trying to get an idea. If we have 16 acres, and you're saying maybe about,
Well, this could generate a bit of controversy in town, but I will tell you right now, my understanding is, and you would have to confirm this with your town attorney, but I believe the town and the school board and the SAU do not have to follow the local regulations. So you can now have that controversy with the town to see whether or not you want to know that. But I have been in numerous towns where they have built schools, and the local setback sometimes is as large as 100 feet. And the SAU said, we're going to talk about it, we're going to have a nice time discussing it, and we're going to build our school. And we're going to do it because we don't have to follow your rules. So that's something that you can discuss with your town attorney about, or whether or not you want to do that. But that has occurred in other towns
Have
that
you
I'm
heard,
aware of.
have you heard, Jim, a less direct approach of a waiver?
That's right.
Yeah.
And again, the question is whether or not the SAU would even be subject to the waiver. So that's kind of the other thing you need to, you know, there are some things you ask for, and you're asking for them because you're a nice guy, or you're asking for them because you think you really need them. So I guess that's one of the issues that, and again, I'm not your legal attorney, but I think there's a legal issue there for you to explore.
What does 10,000 feet equate to? Is it a quarter of an acre?
quarter of an acre.
Quarter acre.
Or less.
Yeah, quarter acre. Yeah.
Jim, what was your first of the four?
Mike, I think it's 44,000.
Oh, the first one is a wetland creation, which I don't recommend at all.
Okay.
Wetland restoration, which you
Yeah,
might
I
find.
have the others, I missed
Okay,
that first
yeah,
one.
yeah,
Thank you.
Wetland creation, creating wetlands where there were none before, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you tell me in terms of setback, that's for structures, but what about things like play areas or fields or soccer fields or anything like that? Is there a difference depending on what you put there, or is?
Again, my understanding is, and I don't have that much familiarity with your local setbacks, but my understanding is that basically you can put, again, from the state's perspective, you can put the edge of the ball field right up to the very edge there. It'd be a local issue as to whether or not you could do that in town.
The setback's the setback, whether it's a parking lot or
Yeah.
a ball field or a building.
I think
Here.
I think there is perhaps some folks do look at setbacks differently if they're impervious versus not pervious, you know.
It's supposed to be a structure setback, but oftentimes it's interpreted as a disturbance setback.
Right.
In other words, construction activity.
So if we're at 15, 16 acres and we're at hypothetically 5 acres maybe wetlands, I sort of look at that saying 25 feet, and it probably is, with all the wanderings, twice as long as the property. Is there how much additional land would you say? Would it go up to 6 acres? 7 acres with the 25-foot setback?
You're asking somebody who didn't have a great math background. I'm sorry, and I don't think, I think that is probably really way excessive. 25 feet does not add, a strip of 25 feet long does not add a lot of
Well, if it was,
additional
I don't know if
area.
it's 1,000 feet, but if it was 1,000 feet, it would add
Right,
like half an
right.
acre or
Maybe
something.
these acreage questions are in Doucette's wheelhouse.
They really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are, yeah.
Another, just as a practical matter here, you know, it seems like the proper way to go here is to see if a design we'd ever consider would even impact this at all,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. I mean, if you don't impact, if you have a design that works and you don't have to impact wetlands at all, then you can pretty much, don't worry about it. You know?
Life's good.
Yeah.
I mean, life's good. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to do an alteration of terrain because you're gonna be impacting, you're gonna have land disturbance of over 100,000 square feet. So you do need to have an alteration of terrain permit, but if you don't impact wetlands, then essentially you don't have a wetlands permit to deal with.
And if there is a design, this is the second question, if there is a design that may encroach that or get up to it, what are the next steps? Is the first call to DES?
Well, what I always like to do, and again, it depends upon the level of encroachment. If you're talking like, well, I'm gonna impact 3,000 square feet, there's a, I don't know, this finger here gets impacted, or I knock off this thing over here, maybe it's like 6,000 square feet. You know, really, those are pretty small numbers. And so in essence, a lot of times, you just simply make the application and then you answer the questions as they come up. I also checked online as far as wildlife habitat and that sort of thing. Nothing came up here that I saw. If you did do an NHB, I'm sure something will come up, but it's going to be over there in the Lamprey River. It's not going to be associated with this parcel, because when they do their search for Natural Heritage Bureau, which is the threatened or endangered species, their search is very wide. They kind of take the point from here and do a half mile around to see what might be there. And so that's why these things come up. But, you know, what you're going to be doing here is not the Lamprey River. So in essence, if you have a design and it's over 10,000 square feet, the very first thing I tell my applicants to do is you're going to go set up what's called a pre-application meeting. And that pre-application meeting, you would request to have it with Collis Adams. He is the Bureau Administrator. You'd hope to get the person who would actually do the permitting on this site, which typically is Frank Richardson in this area. Then you'd also want to have the mitigation specialist, and her name is Lori Sommer, S-O-M-M-E-R. And then you'd also want to make sure that a representative of the Corps of Engineers was present, and that could be Dave Cadell or Rich Kristiniak or one of these other folks, but probably Dave Cadell. And then you wanted to make sure that the representative from the EPA was there as well, and his name is Mark Kern. And what you do is you would essentially bring your plan to them. Typically, they like to see stuff early on as far as emails, so they can kind of think about it a little bit, do their own little bit of research. You go there and you basically say, this is what we're doing, this is our project, this is what we need to do, and we'd like to talk to you about its permittability, its ability to, whether or not this seems to work, and also recommendations on compensatory mitigation. And if you wanted to go, again, I looked up on the town website, and I did notice that you already have some areas that are already protected in town, set aside for conservation easement. Some that are, I think some are handled by the Nature Conservancy, some are handled by other folks. And so, in essence, that if you chose to go that route of land, in other words, basically preservation of they call it preservation of the upland buffer habitat. But that preservation, you'd want to look for parcels that are adjacent to those lands that are already protected. Because a conservation easement requires not just that the land be purchased or, and then say, okay, this is gonna be left forever wonderful. No, it actually has to be protected by a conservation easement, which means you need to have a grantor, and you have to have a grantee. And typically you have to have one of the, Southeast Land Trust, or you need to have Nature Conservancy, or one of these other organizations, or Audubon Society, actually monitoring that to make sure that it is in fact protected in perpetuity. So there's a whole process that goes through along with that. But that being said, you know, that would be one way. It's not necessarily, you gotta kind of look at the financial aspects of it anyway, whether or not it's cheaper just to pay into the ARM fund, or it's better to go and try to find some preservation land and then go through the conservation easement route. So it is a financial decision in many ways.
Just to bring us back to, I think, the beginning of this discussion, it seems like, at least on the map that's in front of me, there are low-level wetlands and high-level wetlands. So does it matter the ranking of the?
Oh, yeah,
wetland
it
in
does,
terms
it
of-
does. And the reason why it does is because this goes back to the whole basic question of avoidance and minimization. So in other words, the concept is you try to avoid wetlands. Well, okay, I can't, all right? I've got my program here, and, you know, if I'm gonna make this thing work, I'm gonna have to impact some wetlands, all right? Well, okay, that's fine. But if you wanna do that, then the next part is the minimization. So the minimization is looking at, okay, I'm gonna not impact the more valuable wetland, I'm gonna impact the wetland that's less valuable. So that's the minimization part of the avoidance, minimization, and then it's actually a three-pronged approach. It's avoidance, minimization, and compensatory mitigation. So that's the three. They call it the mantra of the 404 program: avoidance, minimization, and then compensatory mitigation. So.
Jim, in the center of this piece is a depression with some outcroppings shown there. Can you comment on that piece? Did you walk through it?
It's actually not a depression, it's a knoll.
No, I'm sorry, yeah, opposite. Comment on that area?
As to what? You're gonna run into some ledge, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Is that what these markings are? Is that ledge?
Well, typically, what I find, and this is certainly true in this area, it looks like that Doucette has located areas that potentially could be ledge. I will tell you right now that I would never assume that they're ledge until you get like a 350 or 330 size excavator out there and start digging some holes, because I have seen so many situations where everybody said, oh, it's all ledge, and the next thing you know, you have a massive excavator go in there and it's just huge boulders. So potentially it's ledge until you really find out, you don't know if it's ledge or not. So
What does the ledge do, one way or
the only thing it would actually do is just increase your costs. That's it. I mean, if you have to blast ledge, there's all other issues, okay? Typically, folks from over here get concerned, folks from over there get concerned. Anytime you blast ledge, you end up having folks that are concerned about wells or foundations and that sort of thing. And so if you can possibly not blast ledge, and blasting ledge is expensive. It's not cheap to blast ledge.
If you put everything, all this together, if I'm understanding it correctly, you're saying the existing map is still good for some period of time. You may want to reestablish where the wetlands are and all
Yes.
that. But if we have maps that have lines on it, if somebody stenciled on the 25-foot boundary, for the sake of argument, around those wetlands, and then you were able to give that map to architects and say, if you stay within that line, we have no issues. If you have to expand beyond that line, then we may have progressive issues
Well,
depending on how much land.
those are wetland issues, okay? I mean, there are still gonna be issues, all right, about
Right.
anything, but but if
Avoid
you're
the
talking about
wetlands.
wetland issues,
Yeah.
either local or state or federal, you are accurate in that assessment, yes.
So it would serve us to get something like that to give some comfort to the architects of,
I would,
as they're planning.
I would think they'd be asking, if the architects are working on something, I think they'd be screaming for it right about now, so, yes.
Jim, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Let's say, I mean, we don't have to go into wetlands, we won't go into wetlands, but if we did and we started a first email contact with a different agency, typically how long does the process take?
Well, okay, so.
I mean, are they fairly quick?
Well,
0 to
the,
4.
the pre-application meeting can usually get set up within about a couple weeks. Sometimes 3 weeks. I mean, let's face it, you're going into the holidays now, so this
Well,
is
yeah.
like one of those times where it's like, oh my God. But, you know, typically 2 to 3 weeks are easy enough to get a meeting time. They almost always take place in Concord, at the Department of Environmental Services, Hazen Drive. And, so basically that can happen very quickly. Once you have the pre-application meeting and then you actually start putting the plans together, you have your direction as to what to do, then it's just a matter of actually pulling together all of the bits and pieces that include, you know, okay, what am I gonna do with my drainage? I mean, these are all civil engineering issues. In other words, you can go there with nothing but a concept plan, all right, and say, okay, here's my concept. I don't know exact grades, I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with my stormwater, I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with my snow management, but this is my concept right now, and it's gonna change probably, but this is my idea of what we're gonna have for wetland impact. So this is so typically you go with a concept plan, you don't go with full engineered plans, all right? Because let's face it, if you have to change the plan, it's a bad thing to have spent all the money on a full engineered plan. So you do a simple concept plan. And then, once that's done, then of course the real work comes in for the civil folks, the architectural folks. They really have to make this a real plan. So once they make it a real plan, then you can submit your wetlands applications, the application for the direct impact. And depending upon the amount of impact, it's either going to be a 75-day turnaround or it's going to be a 110-day turnaround, 102-day turnaround. And that break is been based upon the amount of direct wetland impact. So if it's less than 1 acre of direct wetland impact, it's 75 days. And if it's more than an acre, it's typically 102 days. And so that's kind of the time frame you're working in, once you actually submit the application.
So Jim, if we got to the stage where we thought we needed to set up an initial meeting, would you recommend that we have someone like yourself or guide to help us, to guide us through this, who
Yeah.
speaks the language, or?
Yeah, speaks the language, yeah. Yeah, probably that's right, speaks the language.
But also
yeah.
has the relationships with these various people and knows what they're interested in,
Yeah.
and what the factors are.
Yeah, yes, whether it's me or somebody else, yes, I'd absolutely recommend that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of wetland scientists out there who have good relationship with these folks and know, but, yeah, I mean, I do these meetings all the time. I basically have, I don't know, pre-application meetings at least 2 or 3 times a month, so.
Hasn't history shown that not all 3 of the regulators necessarily agree?
It's very interesting. What oftentimes happens, and this is kind of, all right, this is what really happens. All right, essentially, you make your presentation, and they all sit there and they look at it, and they stare at the plans, okay? And nobody says anything. All right. It's kind of like, who's going to speak first? And then, of course, it's always the EPA guy. Always, I mean, it's kind of like the EPA guy drives the bus, as far as I'm concerned. So as long as Mark Kern says, Well, you know, Jim, you know, I always kind of look at whether or not it has a large regional impact and about the functions of this and so forth, and I think you've done a good job of minimizing it. And then all the estimates say, oh, yeah, okay, this is good, yeah, we think this is, you've done a good job minimizing that sort of thing. So it's kind of, that's kind of the way it goes. So they kind of wait for the EPA guy to step up, and because in a great many ways, you know, even though the Corps is the one that administers the 404 program, the EPA is the one that oversees the Corps. So basically, EPA doesn't have that many people, Corps has more, and so when the 404 program was set up, they said, okay, EPA, you're the EPA, so, you know, you administer this thing, but you don't, you'll oversee it, but the actual administration, the actual work of writing up permits or making sure everything complies with the 404 program, that's left for the Corps of Engineers.
So Jim, what might we hope to walk away from in a first meeting like this with regard to this property particularly? Are they going to give us some guidance on
Absolutely,
what
absolutely,
mitigation?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, they will give you, if in fact you had a parcel, and this is something that I had a situation where just 2 weeks ago, no, it was 1 week ago, time flies. And essentially, this parcel, this person wanted to develop this parcel, basically got the okay, yep, that's a really good project, and the functions of the wetlands are pretty low, and yep, okay, we understand the need for the impacts, that's great. And then they wanted to go with a second parcel that had a lot of wetlands on it, and essentially, they offered as compensatory mitigation. And the discussion around the table was, well, okay, it's not connected to any other mitigation parcel. It's kind of in this back area. We don't really see it's going to be threatened by impact. I'm not sure how functionally important this is. We would recommend you don't submit that as a compensatory mitigation parcel because we will reject it. So why don't you go with the ARM fund? So that's the kind of direction that you will get from them. You'll know pretty much how and if you're going to get a wetlands permit. Okay.
And do they, as part of that, do they come out and actually visit the site, or does somebody come out and look at it?
Sometimes they will, but oftentimes they have to be more along the lines of some significant aquatic habitat, like a vernal pool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's when you oftentimes will have them do like a site walk, or maybe a peat bog, or you know, something along those lines, something that has a lot of significance or a sort of unique aspect. I mean, it's a fine parcel, but I'm just telling you, you don't have anything real unique out there, okay?
But isn't it also the wetland scientists, meaning you and your compatriots, that follow the rules, that develop a relationship with the organizations, and your credibility means a lot to you, I would hope.
I hope.
Yeah.
Hope so.
So as long as there are wetland scientists involved, I mean, there still could be discussion among wetland scientists and people, but
Yeah.
you're hiring a professional
Yeah.
And what I was leading to is whether there's a seasonal element to the process, if you get held up by the winter, you know, because the ground's frozen.
Well,
you don't want to delineate during the winter.
yeah, we don't delineate in the winter. Yeah, it's, you know, you get to a certain point where, I mean, right now, life's still good, we can get out there and get stuff done, but, yeah, we don't, you know, you get to a certain point and it's just kind of ludicrous to be out there, so, yeah.
Yeah, Mike, remember when we went to Wells, they went through the same process? They had to mitigate wetlands, wells
Yep,
on their
Wells
new build.
Main, yeah.
yep.
Any other questions? Jim, thank you very much. That
Oh,
was,
you're very welcome.
we're a lot smarter than an hour ago, at least I am.
I just printed this off. I'm not gonna use it again unless you guys want it? This aerial photo?
Yeah, thank you. Great.
I don't think for some reason, I don't think the delineation is quite the same as on this plan. I see this little piece coming out here that's not shown there. So I'm not quite sure whether what iteration that was given to you. I am gonna keep the poster board, however, because there's some pictures on the other side that I need to keep. So
Yeah,
But,
the shapes, the outline on here looks slightly different than
It,
the...
it does look slightly different, so it'd be a good thing to ask Bill about that, whether in fact this was more based on a sketch that, because I think Bill sent this to us as well, or whether that's the actual one, so, but I will leave this with you guys.
I think without too much difficulty, Bill ought to be able to tell us
Yeah.
the exact acreage.
Yes, he can tell you that exact acreage, and he also can tell you if in fact something may have occurred along the side.
Bill has him do set, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
yeah.
I was gonna ask Bill to make that calculation, but I figured save our favors. Ask Bill all at once.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I mean, it's a computer calculation.
Yeah.
So we just have to put the setback on it. Could probably give you both numbers, with the setback and without.
Well, this is computer generated from him, and so he just
Yeah, this is the original drawing.
plugs it in, yeah. Okay.
Well, I think this drawing is from Ty and Bond. That has this whole thing on it. because
Has the comments on it?
The drawings that, that we used, that was used by Banwell, the recent drawings that we got from Banwell, which showed, the drawings that we have, Banwell, their drawings show the Rodriguez piece on there. And I believe that they got those from Ty and Bond. So,
I think we need to stabilize all the pieces, right.
Yeah.
If they have already, that's great, but
Right.
we seem to have
But
an acre off some maps.
it all started with Doucette's piece, because, with his drawing, because he picked up the flagging line, which, if we wanted to know where it was, they could put that back out there.
Right.
for
Based
us.
on these,
Yeah.
yeah.
Based on his original survey.
So,
Or you may have a remediation issue already if the flags are gone and it's been invaded and needs
Well,
to
if you
be
got a
corrected.
tree with flags on it and you got dirt around it.
there may be a combination out there, because I actually walked it with Mark on Sunday. Was it Sunday? There's some flags there. I don't know how many were there originally or not. And
Definitely a lot more than what we saw.
Yeah. And,
Well, there's a start and a stop numbering system generally.
oh, on the flags themselves?
Right,
Yeah.
that's how it's done.
Yeah, they look pretty beat up,
Oh, yeah.
what was there.
They would be since 2011.
And the reason why I asked if these little symbols on here were ledge is because they seem to be where we saw rocks sticking out,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
granite, but,
Well, but they could be the huge, I know they're doing the excavation for the wastewater treatment plant. You should see some of the boulders they've had
could be
to
huge
take out of
boulders,
there.
because actually over here, Mark and I, over in this section, for public's benefit over here, we saw a pile of boulders, glacial erratics or whatever that were just dumped there.
Well, I think when they were leveling the ground or taking away the buildings or whatever work was done there, there was a lot of earth movement around this summer,
It
wasn't
was, these boulders have been here for a long time. Yeah, the farmers worked around those, they're huge. So just to complete the thoughts on this, it seems like, and I'm open, I'm throwing this out there in terms of next steps, it seems, along the lines of what Rush said, figure out what the acreages are here, the potentialities, with a 25-foot setback as well, as a conservative approach to see, what is possibly available without impacting, but also if we were to impact over here, what's this total acreage? I know that some drawings of old plans and new plans either had buildings over there or fields. So it seems that we need to find out what potential impacts are over here. Just so we have all that information. It's just another factor in terms of pros and cons, so.
Spatially, just looking at it, it sort of seems if it's 15 acres and you have around 5 acres, and not that we can hold Jim to that, of wetlands, you're probably 3.5 on the upper left, and you're probably 1.5, 2 on the other.
Well, I can go see Bill and ask him if he'll make the calculations.
That would be great if you can do that, Skip. Yeah.
Do that tomorrow.
But I think we need a formal, I mean, I'd hate to have us or Bill just answer one question and throw that into the architects without giving them all the, we need just to make sure that we're starting in the best right place, so we don't have a surprise later on that says, gee, you didn't
Can I
ask this
ask who
question.
put the comments on here? So like, for example, this map says, okay to fill this finger. There's another comment, we had
Ty and
proposed-
Bond, wasn't it?
This is Ty and Bond's comments?
I believe that was time born, yeah.
So, okay, I mean, because if this is something that needs to be mitigated, then that's an issue, but if not, I mean, because the little finger that sticks out on the side, you know, that interrupts what would be prime space
Yeah,
for buildings right there, and then,
I mean,
I think that's what Jim said. If you're taking little pieces and you stay under 10,000 square feet in total, and you're just widening out and smoothing out,
Right.
you don't even have to worry the process. If you're taking large chunks in places, you may have to worry the process. And,
I mean,
part of me says we're kind of lucky, because, you know, this little corner, I guess, what is that, like the southwest corner, where most of the pristine wetlands, it would kind of be tough to build in that, just because of the shape. You know, so those more valuable wetlands seem to be in a good place on the property. If you had to put them somewhere, that would be a good place to put
Yeah,
them.
not that we would think of building over here. It's a big piece. If you go out there and walk it, you know, that's a big chunk of land, you know?
If you were to utilize something like that, I would see that more for fields, for ball fields,
Yeah. But there,
structures.
But essentially, I mean, it is what it is, and that's all I think we all of us want to know is if it's a 15 or 16 acre piece, and we bought it, we own it, and there's probably 5 to 6 acres that it's going to cost us money to use, and that may be spread in a lot of different places that makes it easier or difficult to build around. And
Right.
I certainly think we need to size that up in the next.
right, so we ought to circle back, and when I say we, I will, with Ingrid, and first of all, encourage her to watch this clip, but also, I think, maybe just get an initial take from her. Is something possible over here without touching, you know? It doesn't seem so if you're gonna include fields as well. Maybe a building is possible without encroaching, but maybe the fields.
Well, if you remember, she gave us the option of just having a track in a baseball field.
Yeah.
That won't fit.
No, that's
No,
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying,
it's-
so, but she ought to start having that in mind. And then also, you know, in parallel to that, you know, find out from Bill, you know, what the acreage is here, and then we'll have an idea of what, if, and we've got an estimate here from Jim tonight, 175,000 per acre, over 10,000 square feet, you know, what a potential cost might be if you impacted it.
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I mean, what we're doing here is we're playing civil engineer, you know, to a certain degree. And
It's nice we're civil.
it's been done before. I mean, you know, Ty and Bond had a whole plan with a whole school drawn on this. And they had this wetlands, half of this wetlands impacted with building. And so those plans are out there and available, but I think we have a totally different program from what they had envisioned before. And we're kind of, in my mind anyway, we're doing the next step beyond what we've asked the architects to do so far. They've been dealing with the elementary school and with the junior, senior high school, and a little bit coming across the street, but not. Now, after the last meeting, we've asked them to come up with a full program pretty much across the street. So
Right.
they're gonna run into all this stuff that we're talking about.
And that's fine, we just need to know what the facts are, know what the costs are and the impacts are.
Whatever we need to do to get our best set of facts as quickly as possible, just so we don't chase the architects
Right.
in a lot of different directions. A slightly bigger thing, Mike, I'm just sort of thinking, we're getting into meat and we're getting into some interesting issues. And I know I mentioned minutes to you before, and you said, maybe we'll get those in our lifetime. But there's enough issues coming, whether it's a town, is it EPA, on this land, other land pieces around the buildings. I'd love to get something we can have as a working sheet that says, here's the Carpenter property, and here's either next steps, here are ideas people had. You talked about swapping land that maybe you can talk to the town on. But something like next steps, follow-up issues, ideas that people have that eventually we may want to pursue, but we want to put off to the side. I'd love to have, what are those 10, 15 moving pieces, and what are the 5 or 6 things we've had, so I have a reference sheet. I just can't keep all that stuff circulating in my
Yeah,
brain
that's a good
anymore.
idea, Russ. So like a fact sheet, and maybe even, have a map with it, so.
Either facts or need facts,
Yeah.
or need to
Yeah,
pursue.
what needs to be nailed down.
I mean, a list of actionable items.
Yeah, I call it whatever just some organization that says, you have good stuff, bad stuff, and stuff we don't know yet, and let's find it out. And we got 10 issues.
So typically, the person who volunteers that proposal is the one who does it. That's usually meeting procedure, but I won't be so cruel. If anybody likes that or that issue or has an affinity for it, I've got enough to do on my plate. If somebody would take that on, I'd appreciate it.
If there's a format, from our educational side of the equation that says, here's a good model to put on each one of these issues. Here are the 3 or 4 questions you want to fill out. That the committee, thinks is useful. I'd rather get the structure down and then having everybody get a structure and then say, here are the thoughts that I have. Let's collect everybody's thoughts under, what did you remember here? What did you remember? You can at least start to squish things together. But format-wise, I don't have a magic format. I don't know if anybody else did.
Well, I mean,
I'll be more than happy to work on it, but I think we
Yeah.
need a structure that people say that makes sense.
and I guess that structure would be revolve around what's useful to you or useful to us. And so, just thinking off the top of my head here, I think what would be useful, in combination with having a map like this, say, for instance, for the Carpenter property, is a list of things we know. Acreage, or at least the things we might know. Acreage, wetlands issues, issues that we need to find out in terms of acreage of wetlands. This isn't complicated, so, and it's not written in stone either, so we can amend it. But I do agree, just so we keep a sort of a list of things, but also so people can, at the end of the day, can see, can quickly refer to these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sort of thinking if anybody has is more up on projects or things like that and says, here's a little wonderful project approach. It's got 3 pieces of any project you want, things we need to know, things we know.
I would be willing to try to list everything we know about this property, technically, based upon what we have here and other things that I've seen. And I can certainly do that for our next meeting, and try to get this acreage figured out, and make a bullet list of things that we know about it.
And that's the reason I'm bringing it up, is I know you had mentioned before that there's land adjacent to the elementary school that's part of maybe Durrell Woods, that maybe there's some conversation that may be helpful on whether we can expand that way, or here's another parcel of land that somebody we got a lot of balls floating in the air. I just sort of like to get them all down on a piece of paper, so.
And Mike, to put this in perspective, on the last vote for developing the school property, it was a 171,000 square foot facility that's proposed there. If you go back and look at the maps, very little of the wetlands was impacted.
Mhm.
It was more off to the right.
Yeah, I think we
I mean,
have I
that's-
actually I have a drawing, a tie and bond drawing showing
Yeah.
it. It's not much at all, and maybe it doesn't exceed the 10,000
Yeah.
foot, the 10,000 foot thing, but, and this is something maybe it's Diane Hardy who's in charge of this, but say theoretically you did have your building in there, and you still didn't have any wetlands issues. Well, you're right in the middle of it. How does the 25-foot setback work in that case?
Well,
You
either
know.
that or Mike from working with DES.
I never heard of an approach where, maybe I just haven't heard of it, where a school district just, or some other government body ignores another rule. That scares me.
Well, it's
It's
happened
done all the
before.
time.
Yeah.
It's happening right now on
Yeah.
Durrell Drive in Newmarket.
Yeah.
You know, they're building a water blending building, a water blending plant on land that they took by eminent domain. And there are no plans or specifications available to the public. No cursory planning board meetings were held. And the town is just doing it because supposedly the law says that municipalities do not have to pay attention to the laws in their own municipality. They can do what they choose when they want to. A lot of towns do give courtesy looks to the planning board, and it doesn't happen here in Newmarket, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, we can discuss it more if we need to. Maybe it doesn't even come up as an
Well,
issue, but just,
it happens so regularly here as well. I mean, the SAU is not part of the town charter. Okay, so if it wants to operate with the town charter, when it wants to, it can, and when it doesn't want to, it doesn't have to. That's happened for years, okay?
it is, however, a landowner, just as I'm a
Well,
landowner, so
the-
we can't willy-nilly just, let's.
Yeah, you
we-
can. The SAU can also not follow any of the RSAs that are there
Yeah.
on budgets, et cetera. It's its own entity. And that's been a push-pull
Mhm.
between everybody getting on the same page or not. You know, there was I think Jim mentioned something tonight that said, but the SAU doesn't have to follow those rules, and it could fight the town or the EPA, and you can get your lawyer on that. And if those are potential issues, then I'd love to see the town come together on something and not get blown apart.
Well, there's a common interest, but good that we know about those things. So I'll discuss this with Ingrid, and encourage her to watch that clip. And maybe this is not even an issue at all in terms of her designs, or maybe her designs, her conceptual designs are amended, so it doesn't become an issue.
You know, the point was taken, Dan said, you know, the last proposal was 171,000 square feet. And to the best of my knowledge, there was like a cross-shaped portion of the building that was in this easterly wetland. And,
Around.
well, it was in here. There it is. That's
Yeah,
it,
see.
right there. So if that was 171,000 square feet, everything we've been looking at, you know, we've got 80 some odd thousand, 85,000, 87,000 square feet now, and we're thinking about 105,000 square feet. Those numbers have been kicked around.
Well, that's if you're gonna build a full new building, but then the parking lot would have to get added on to
Right, so I
that.
mean, you're talking about a 65,000 square foot difference in structures, so maybe it's very possible to fit a program of 105 or 110,000 square feet, and
Absolutely.
have fields and not impact the wetlands, because certainly, after you listen to Jim for an hour, you don't want to impact wetlands, if you can help it.
You don't want to impact them if you don't have to, but I mean, it's just, like I said, and I'm going to keep going back to this theme, whether we do impact wetlands or we don't, we need to know what the factors are. I mean, it's part of our due diligence, what the cost would be. And because somebody may ask, you know, why didn't you put a field over here? Well, because it's going to cost us $300,000 to buy, to pay into the ARM fund.
Right.
Well, it's also something we can think about incrementally too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, in some of the things that we've looked at from Banwell was, you know, potential for creation of fields and stuff. So maybe that was, you know, things to think about going forward with space and its constraints.
I agree. I mean, regardless of what we come up with, any rules of the road or any facts we can get down that are validated by the agencies in the town, and, yeah, it would be great, because things may continue to be talked about for years and years and years in a long-term plan.
Yep.
That's why I was saying, start to get some of this, down on paper.
Okay, well, that was a good discussion. So I guess the next on the agenda, we're going to talk, we brought up last time, we talked a little bit about the issue of the transfer students, and again, just for public reference, the JEC report discussed an issue of a phenomena, it's called, of students abnormally decreasing in, I think it's after sixth grade in Newmarket, or going elsewhere. And so the reason we are interested in that issue is because it impacts potentially enrollment numbers, and so we, in the JEC report, Randy Bell advised that we try to get our arms around that, and Chris has done some more work on that, and I'll let him explain what he's got for us.
So let's take the first sheet that says student transitional data. That was the numbers that we looked at last time when I presented that long list of all the kids that moved from 2009, 2010. I broke it down to where they went. If they were just a straight move, that's categorized as a move, whether that's in-state or out-of-state. Private means a student enrolled in a private school, whether that be, most of them were Berwick Academy or St. Thomas Academy with a few PCA sprinkled in there. Charter school is any one of the charter schools that a student has attended. Students that registered as homeschools that left our school. Students that were sent out of district, those are usually IEP students or students with disabilities. And then the other were students that were exchange students that went back to their country, students who finished their GED through Exeter Adult Ed or Dover Adult Ed. Those could be students that did drop out, or students that did not enroll once they left our school. They moved but did not enroll. So for whatever reason, they went to, say, Portsmouth and did not enroll in that school system. So we lost track of it through their student identification number. So that's what these categories represent.
So other is something that just should stay as other, there's
Yeah,
no
it's-
hidden meaning, there's other.
Exactly.
How
So if you
many-
look at it-
How many kids, Chris, this covers about, what, 7 or 8 years? And this
This
is only
2009.
the junior high?
No, this is 6 through 12. These are all students 6 through 12.
And so is the general population, if we're having a number against these, would you be using about 600? Or that's the other sheet?
Yeah, I'll get into that one. So that breaks it down even further.
Answered it, thank you.
So that broke down the sheet a little bit more because you asked which category they were based on the number of kids per year. The colored sheet that I give you, and this is generated from our guidance department, and Tom Pavlidis did a fantastic job on this, so I'm not going to even take credit for this. What this does is you see BOY, it's beginning year numbers, and the Department of Education starts out by October 1st. So it's not your first day of school, it's October 1st of what you have enrolled in your building. And then your end of year number is your closing date, the day that we end school for all kids, not graduation. It would be graduation date for seniors, but then it would be your end of your school day, June 16th, 17th, whatever you go to. So that's what those numbers represent. So if you can look, when we started, we had an enrollment of 512 kids in 2009. Last year, we ended with 473 kids. So over the course of those years, we've lost 39 kids, right? So you say, how does that happen with these numbers being minus 27? So let me take you to the first column where it says Newmarket Junior Senior High School 6 through 12. Those are kids that withdrawed over the summer. So that represents a total number of kids that left over the summer. When you look at the next column, it says new 6 through 12. Those are kids that pretty much enrolled over the summer for Newmarket. So those count for us. Then we broke it down even further for kids that transferred in during the school year at the junior high and kids that transferred out at the junior high. So if you just look at last year, we had 27 kids move out over the summer, 13 kids move in during the summer, but then we had 9 kids transfer in during the school year, 8 kids at the junior senior high school transfer out, 7 high school kids transfer in, 10 high school kids transfer out. with a net, if you take the summer, of minus 16 kids. Okay? That's if you take the summer. You don't take that for your beginning of the year numbers because those 27 kids don't count for the Department of Education.
How does that, is there a way to say, how does that look against other schools? When the population of the school seems to be declining little by little every year.
I think if you look at all New England states, that's very similar.
Right, and from your professional opinion and knowing that stuff, does this look to you like it's semi-normal or
Yeah, except for what
abnormal?
our growth years coming through, so, and I think that's reported in the Joint Advisory Committee and Mark Joyce's report for our enrollment numbers going up, which is a phenomenon that is not current in most school districts.
Right, for a short period of time,
Sure,
and then it
yep.
drops back down again.
Correct, yeah.
So if you look out for the next 6 years, well, 6 years, because you can go K through
Yep.
5.
Yep.
What do those numbers look like
Well,
coming up?
next year's current fifth grade class has about 75 kids, 75, 76 kids, so they'll be going up into the sixth grade.
Correct.
After that, my classes are anywhere from 91 to 80. For next year's fifth grade to kindergarten. So you're gonna be pretty stable. I wouldn't say, minus the moving out or going to a private elementary school or what have you, but we're right around 80 to, I'd say mid-80 to low 90s.
Do you remember that there was one particular class that was kind of a bubble class?
Yeah, we have,
That's the incoming,
we have them right now.
Yeah.
We have 89 kids in the current seventh grade, and we have 96 kids, actually 97, a girl just enrolled the other day. So we have 97 kids at the sixth grade level.
But if you took that average, I think it still comes out with Joyce and what everybody had looked at, about 1,000, give or take a little bit.
Yep.
And that stays pretty steady, other than an occasional year bump here, year bump there.
Chris, can I ask, do you have capacity for 97 in 6th grade?
You're at it. As I've said in past meetings, it's more difficult at the middle school level because you're confined to 4 content area classrooms, so you've got about 25 kids per classroom in those areas. At the high school, it's a lot easier by the way our schedule's built. So those class sizes are lower, where you got about 15 kids per class because our schedule accommodates 8 periods rather than just those 4.
So over the weekend, other than eating leftovers, I read and reread the Mark Joyce most recent report, which relies on the NESDEC demographic study that was done in December 2014. I also read the New Hampshire School Administrators Association, again, Mark Joyce's report in 2010, the demographic study for Newmarket. And I also, I looked, NESDEC has the actual student numbers in one of the graphs in the final report going back to, I think, 99 or 98 or something like that. A couple of themes. It seems like demographic or enrollment projections are really an adventure after 5 years. You just don't know where, within a certain range. They become less valuable or less accurate more than 5 years out. Both NESDEC's and Dr. Joyce's demographic enrollment projections were pretty close to the actual numbers for their 5-year projections. But what I also noticed is that, back in 99, 98, there were total students in the upwards of 1,150. I don't know if it ever got over 1,200. And here's the thing, we're not building a 5-year school. At the end of the day, we're never gonna know if we're gonna spike back up to those numbers or not. And so how do you responsibly plan for that in a long-term solution? And I think we heard a little bit of that from Ingrid. And in part, it's an educated guess is really what it comes down to. It's akin to trying to predict the economy within a certain range. Russ has made the point before, I agree that we're not going to double, or we're not going to probably even half as much our student population, but it is possible we could creep back up to those numbers at some time. Especially, if you have a new facility and you got a nice town and people come in. So we, at some point soon, have to sort of come to grips with what we think is a number, I think, two numbers that, to give to Ingrid. We'll have to obviously run it through the school board for approval, but one, she talked about core spaces and how it's difficult to build those later on. And so the strategy may be, and I'm just throwing this out there and everybody chime in, but the strategy may be to be more conservative in building out our core spaces and reflecting potential bubbles. And then maybe we can be a little less worried or a little less conservative in building classroom space or closer to the edge. That seems to be a logical approach, because you don't want to have to be building core spaces if you creep back up to numbers. And, you know, so.
I think we heard that from Ingrid on several occasions already. That the key is flexibility of design, but
Right.
but to be sure that there's adequate core spaces to handle that if that bubble occurs. And seems to be careful in their designs, and what we've seen when we visited other schools, that there was adequate space available for future classroom additions, but the core space was good. The only place I saw that I didn't think it was good was in Lebanon, the cafeteria, which was really small. I was really surprised by
Mhm.
that. But they kept stealing from it when they needed other spaces. I think they made a mistake, but what can I say? The rest of the school was great, I thought.
And to add to core spaces, maybe, Chris, you talked a little bit about this before. There are, I guess, you know, for I guess, sixth grade spaces or middle school spaces, you need so many rooms. There's less flexibility to move things around than there is at the high school. So that, I mean, that has to be reflected too. But I guess what I'm saying is and I said it in the email, my thought is that we try to wrap up the ed specs here in the next couple of weeks, so we could have them to the school board to review. And along with that, we ought to, unless we think that we need some other work in terms of enrollment projections, I think we have enough data, and we know what the range is going to be, that we sort of all get comfortable with a number, you know.
Wait, was there a, you know, usually when you do kind of demographic data, there's a kind of a statistical significance and, you know, a plus or minus 8% or 10%. Just since you've read this recently, was there usually there's a range that they are comfortable
Plus or
with.
minus 10%.
Yeah, plus or minus 10% or 8% or 12%. I don't know what that would be, but.
It was also interesting to note that the NESDEC projections were about 100 students in some case off from the school administrators. And I don't know if anybody saw the presentation by Dr. Joyce when they come in. There's a lot of debate on how you come to these numbers, and you know, it's almost proprietary. But even, I guess what it showed me is, and it happens all the time, is that, you know, good minds and experts can substantially differ, and in that case by a factor of about 10%. But my overall theme here is that we're never going to nail it down to an actual number. We just have to be comfortable that we're taking I guess a conservative but not overly cautious approach when we're building out, and we need to get that. It's our responsibility to get those numbers to the school board, and then once we're all comfortable with them, and then give it to Ingrid, because she needs that to really narrow things down.
I think the school board has the numbers. I don't know how many times we have to revisit it, but from everything that I can tell, I'd be hard pressed to say that our school population is going to grow by more than 5 or 10%, up or down, okay, for the next years, based on the town now having a lot of buildable space, having extra kids before that fit in the school, the graying of New Hampshire and all those things. So I think the best approach we can do is to use the data. I have nothing new to add. You know, when I heard the tuitioning discussion before, I remember, and I love the fact that you can make a point on either side of the issue depending on what you want to, you know, which side you come out on. But it was, let's not take in tuitioning, because tuitioning can only last 3 or 4 years. If we were going over to Durham or somewhere else, you know, unless we got a joint agreement where we'd all manage the school district together, who would want to stay on a tuitioning basis for more than 3 to 4 years. So unless somebody came in and said, we have a school that's signing up guaranteed for the next 25 years to give us 200 kids, and it's ironclad, I would say it's 1,000 kids, give or take. You know, the class size, as Chris said before, and Ingrid has said, you have wiggle room of plus or minus, you know, 15%, 20%, depending on the grade and how many kids in sixth. I can't see us saying the sixth grade space has to have a 17% variance because of the classroom size, and us dictating that to Ingrid. I mean, you know, you guys, but I'd like to finish this and not keep bringing it up that let's build a school that's 20% bigger than we have today, or renovate to 20%, because nothing I see from all the experts, and we've already revisited 3 or 4 times, says that that's something you should plan on. But that's my opinion, you know, I don't know what anybody else says.
Yeah, it's I would concede that I don't have a crystal ball, but there's just so many variables, and Ingrid talked about one of them, that if you build or improve your facilities, you may have incoming people. So let's take the 1,000 student number, Russ. Well, your 5% window is just 50 more kids, you know, and in '99 and, you know, around that time, we had 1,150, just a little over that, so.
Yeah, but our class size is down at 20, and the maximums were 28, and that's
Right.
the way everybody said you manage through those little bubbles and changes.
You
So-
do, but and we will find out what we can survive with those bubbles in terms of space, and Ingrid, that's really Ingrid's job to tell us, but, you know, there are a lot of variables, and again, we don't have a crystal ball. It's very difficult to predict, you know, because, and I quibbled with the JEC report a little bit because it talked about statewide data. So what? You know, we're not Berlin. We're not Coas County. It's almost meaningless to talk about those areas in comparison to our own. And that's borne out of another observation of the JEC report, that the elementary population has stayed the same or slightly increased over the time that so, I mean, I'm not talking about, you know, drastic changes here, but we need to, we need to come up with a number we can justify to get to.
I ask why. I mean, I feel uncomfortable, both because I'm not an expert in the education field and all the statistics, and just repeat the things that I hear usually that make sense to me. And we've had several professionals go through this with JAC and this last round. They're all sort of coming out with the same number and the same look, give or take 50 kids. I feel uncomfortable as a facilities committee member with a lack of knowledge, saying we have a responsibility to tell the school board what the number is when they've already asked a series of professionals to do it already. It's come back with an answer. So is that part of our role, is to recommend to the school board as people who aren't all that involved with the
I think,
school?
Mike, once we take a look at the ed specs and we've got them complete, so if we build them for 6 through 12 as it is now, and Sean does his through pre-K through 5, that will give us what we need for our programming. That's how we came up with the 171 square foot school.
Okay.
Last time, it was based on the program needed to run that, based on your student population and also based on school capacity. So you're not over scheduling your building, which we do right now. we're at 98% capacity at the junior, senior high school with the way that it's scheduled out from classroom to classroom. DOE says you should be at 84% to run a well-managed building and then have those spaces if you do have a bubble year without impacting your programming. So I think to talk about a number now, we're not going to be able to nail it down. I think we need those ed specs and look at it and say, okay, this is why we need 4 classrooms at the 6th grade level. This is why you need 4 at the 7th grade, 8th grade. And then what does it look like for science? Science is much different than social studies in regards to your room. And square footage and the number of students you can have in there. So that weighs into, do you add another science classroom based on number of kids you can have in there? So I think that number there, Mike, will help maybe alleviate this problem, because then we can really digest it. So that's our goal next, is to have those numbers for next week and really get through them.
And that's good. Maybe, Russ, you misunderstood me. I'm not saying we step in as demographers, because I'm not
You're
qualified.
saying come up with a number.
I'm not-
And so it seems
well,
the issue, though,
It
is.
doesn't mean come up out of whole cloth with a number. Look at all the data that's been presented to us, sift through it, make sure we're comfortable with it, and then say, hey, this is good, we think, and,
I'm fine with
Go ahead.
that. My
Yeah.
issue
Yeah.
being, the one that says, okay, we've done all the work, we've figured out all the specifics of the class sizes and all that. Here's the number, it's still 1,000 kids. I recognize the square footage could change depending on where they are. But let's build it 30% bigger because they will come. Number one, I don't think that's our purview. Okay, it's the school boards, if they want to make a decision like that, then they'll have to tell the voters. But everything I've seen says, I don't personally feel comfortable. I feel very comfortable that you know what space you need for a class size of 27 kids, and that we should have flexibility built in. But, and this thing about looking into the future and we potentially know more than everybody else does, doesn't make me feel all that comfortable. So just.
Since we're talking enrollment numbers, let me just say this. I don't know what the future's gonna be, so I can look at charts and what the past has been, and I look at the enrollment from Newmarket from 1999 to 2010, it's gone down. That's for Newmarket. But I don't care about Concord. I don't care about way up there, whatever they do. I want this general area. So I went and I got the SA 16 report, and that's for Brentwood, East Kingston, Exeter, Kensington, Newfield, Stratham. If you go from 2009 to 2015, they've lost, 6% of their student population. And I'm just saying, is Newmarket unique? Because I don't think so. But I don't care about, pocket area. I care about the seacoast area.
Right.
I think it's a pretty good
Right.
representation. But I do, we gotta, at some point, there has to be a number,
Well,
and.
At some point, there has to be a number, but and we don't substitute ourselves as the experts either. But I'm also looking ahead and that, we're gonna need to speak this language and be able to relay it persuasively, so we need to, things like that can help, we need to be comfortable with it.
Well, and I don't think we actually need a crystal ball. We have a lot of good empirical information here. But at the same time, I think we need to be prudent looking forward, that we wouldn't want to build this and 10 years down the line, not have capacity and all of a sudden running 5, 6 lunch rooms because all of a sudden we're in that same. So I think Ingrid's advice, and it sounds like many schools have gone, many people have gone before us that have thought about their schools and that need, and that those, those common spaces, are really something that you can just make a little bit, just have a little bit more flexibility there. And at the same time, tightening the belt and being prudent about, the classroom spaces. So, we don't want to put ourselves in a place that we are at capacity at 98% in 10 years. But, we don't need a crystal ball. We just, just need to be realistic and prudent.
And to have that, you're much more flexible at a high school with all those numbers based on a schedule than you are K through 8 because of certain numbers. When they built the co-op at Exeter, they were over capacity a year and a half later because they did have an influx, and then you see population go down. The high school has seen an influx of kids, but they can accommodate it, so they're not over capacity. So again, when you look at that, we can handle it at a high school level based on your schedule, and then kids going to SST, and then that takes away 40 kids at a time that you open up spaces, so you can get very creative. We can't send kindergartners to SST, to open up spaces,
Do you
so.
know where Epping is? I mean, they built a new school,
Yeah.
and I don't know where they are in capacity. I thought
Sure,
they
and
were
again, when they
down
first opened
below.
up, they saw a lot of, a lot of families move over that way, and they've kind of leveled off. They're about the same number we are right now, in regards to kids, but capacity, I mean, they did a huge renovation. They're not even close to a capacity. They were at a time where they had some open classrooms when they did their renovations.
Right, so they're, I don't know what the magic number is,
Yeah.
but I'm assuming if we're 98%, they're more in the 60 or 70% of
Oh, I
capacity.
think more closer to the 80,
Okay.
but I don't know that number.
And there is a tendency, it seems like, to sort of focus on the junior, senior high school, but part of our overall plan too here is the elementary school, obviously. And so, on Chris's point, it becomes more of an issue there
It does.
with set spaces and I guess, we need to be mindful of that, and I'm sure, Ingrid will be in terms of flexibility over there. So, any more discussion on that, or is everybody comfortable? And, so next to the last thing, and, other than scheduling, wanted to talk about, we brought it up last time, is the, idea of the warrant article for design fees only, for this March, or the proposal for a warrant article for design fees only. And again, just for clear understanding, the idea with that is that, at this point, we're not going to be ready for a project warrant article come this March. So this simply, we haven't had enough time to review everything, and also to have public input and, bring everybody up to speed by March. It's just not going to happen. An alternative way to proceed, which the architects spoke about with us, was and they've done it, is to have a warrant article for the design fees. Again, there are two phases essentially to the building process. There's the pre-design work coming up, what we're doing right now with the conceptual designs. That's the relatively least costly part. The real money comes in when you decided what you're going to build, and the architect and the engineers do their work for finished drawings. That's the bulk, 95% of the architect's fee. Typically, those fees are a function of construction costs, anywhere from 6 to 9%. They typically are a little bit more on the higher end for renovations than they are for new construction, because there's just more complications with renovations. So in terms of our process here, having a warrant article in March for design fees only would allow us to do several things. It would allow us to keep going throughout the summer, to really, after we've had public input and decided, which way we're going to go in terms of a design, to have the architect working on the design drawings to be finished up by the fall, so you can put them out to bid, a project out to bid, and know exactly what your costs are, or have a cost estimator do that for you, whichever way. And then, come March of 2017, you're ready for a full project vote, you know what the costs are gonna be. And the other factor is one of timing. You can get going right then. You don't wait another year, you don't wait all that summer for the architect to do finished drawings. Again, not having a crystal ball, I suspect interest rates will go up rather than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's a pretty good bet.
And so time is a factor on that. And, obviously, resolving the problem for the children is foremost. And every day that goes by there is a day lost. So, an opportunity lost, so that's foremost in our minds as well. We simply don't want to delay this any more than we have to. So, with that said, it is, and I'm opening it up for suggestion, I've talked about this concept with Ingrid, and she's working on some numbers. To me, conceptually, we, as you know, as a school district ought to receive a discount on this approach. And the reason being is that if the town approves the warrant article for this, the Banwell firm is, you know, after we have public input and decide, you know, which design we're gonna go with, they're gonna do their design work, and that they're gonna essentially be guaranteed the bulk of their fee if the warrant article is approved, okay? Under the current approach, they would need to wait on a full project approval. So that's, under that scenario, they gain something, you know? We're at risk a little bit, because if a project never is approved based on those drawings, we've got some nice drawings to look at, but really nothing else,
We
you know?
sell the old ones?
I think we'll have hopefully we'll buy the copyright on them, so we'll make sure that's in the contract, but you can see where I'm going. You know, there's a give and take there, okay? Banwell, you know, you're gonna do work in good work, and you'll do it now, and you're guaranteed your fee, but we're putting ourselves out there a little bit too. I mean, at least that's the way I'm looking at it. But we also need to, and I'm working on this with Ingrid as well, come up with estimated fees for civil engineering. You know, we heard about tonight, potentially. It's a little, you know, it's uncertain exactly what those fees might be, but what I think we need to do is conceptually come up with a proposal that has a discount for us, but also keeps us going, so we're not delaying, and, you know, between now and next March of 2017.
Mike, would this be a bond?
Yes.
Warrant article?
Yeah.
Can we throw numbers out there? Do you feel uncomfortable?
You can throw numbers out there.
It's gonna be between 2 and 3,
2 or 3 million?
don't you think?
No.
No?
Oh,
The total design?
no. 6% of 25 million is 1.5.
I mean, where do we get the 25 million?
I don't know, but I'm just throwing that, I'm throwing that number out there, but it's 6% of that amount. Well, that's the number Ingrid used in the JEC report as the upper end, okay,
For a new build, or
for new build.
what I'm talking about,
We-
everything? We're talking
No,
about,
we're
I'm talking about the
talking about
elementary
The
school.
elementary school as well.
Plus the
Yeah.
high school. You know,
Yeah,
My thought is that 2 million is probably the tops.
And I guess, how do we come up with a fee? We don't really know what we're designing. If we could have something for a warrant article,
Right.
you know, we'd have to have that in by, what, January?
Yeah, well,
it could be an up to type of thing.
to me, it's a structure. You know, when you say guarantee, it makes me twitch, because that's not a word that goes through the courts particularly well, much less ever in real life. If we're gonna be, I understand the concept, though. So from the concept that says, gee, if we're actually gonna all agree on something and move down that road, let's not delay it another year by saying we won't even have the money to do the final plans until March of 2016. And I don't even know if we made the decision. I thought we were supposed to make the decision 11:30 as to whether and maybe the school board has, that we're not going for the full Monty this March. And that's off the table. So the next question is, do we go for some warrant article to keep the process going? Is that a decision that's been made?
Yeah, I mean, the school board discussed this, I forget, it was a week or two ago at a meeting, and, you know, we've essentially, you know, concluded that we're not gonna be ready for a project vote in March of 2017, but there was consensus. 16, sorry. 2016, and, you know, but there was interest in the idea of a warrant article in 2016 for design fees appeals to the school board in general. And so, but the devil's in the details, and that's what we're here to sort of brainstorm about is, you know, how might we structure that's beneficial to all involved. I mean, I don't want, and they wouldn't, but I don't want the Banwell firm to be, you know, working for less than what they're worth, you know?
I think there's some structural points that, and I think you've already thought of some of them. anybody can shut me up anytime they want, but I'll tell you a few of them. One is the bonding issue. If you think about bonding this cost, it's at least spreading that over, let's say a 20-year period, if that's what you choose to bond, and then if the project's approved and everybody votes for it, then you'll roll that bond into the larger bond for the school, okay? And I think this is a good idea, and one I can support that says if we're gonna actually do something, let's not delay it another year. The guaranteed part of it makes me a little twitchy, so I'd like to sort of hold the school board responsible for approving that the funds are used, and not saying to Banwell, whatever we approve, you're guaranteed to get as a fee, because we don't exactly know what we're doing yet. So I'd like to have some trigger in there that somebody's responsible. I wouldn't want to go to 3 million, because I think it's irrational. Even if it turns out to be rational, I'd like to go through the process that says we've just doubled up on what the architectural fees are, because we're going to all agree we're going to build this size thing. So I think, I don't know the right number, but $1 million to $2 million range sounds, like it's a reasonable place to get the engineers and the architects we need moving in the right direction as we migrate down, if that's what you're saying. So I think you can put some of these structures together from a financial point of view, and if it's bonded, it won't be an immediate $1 or $2 impact for 1 year in everybody's taxes, and it'd be spread out over time. The only other thing is, I think from CIP and the Budget Committee, there's probably around $200,000 in two funds that the school board has. There's about 75 grand or so, and I think that's the number Christine gave me, in the school expansion fund, which is the only fund that the school board doesn't have the right to use. The town has to vote for that to be used. And I think there's about 130,000, give or take, left over in the fire and life safety or build a new school fund after the elevator. I think that's what Christine mentioned. So I think there's existing $200,000 that in trust funds.
Are those separate funds still, or is that the dual
There's
purpose
two
fund
separate
now?
funds. There's a
There's just
school, I have the stuff here. We used to look at this actually on the Budget Committee, but there was 71,000 in a expansion of school trust fund, which the school board can't use unless they get voter approval. And then there was about 550,000, I think the number after the elevator is going to be about 130 left in a dual purpose fund. And the dual purpose was fire and life safety or a new school. And that way, it's the first fund we ever had where you don't have to give the money back. The school was set up that if you asked for money and you didn't use it, you had to actually give it back to the taxpayers as a credit against what next year's budget is. The dual purpose, my compliments to the chef on that one, created a fund where you never have to give the money back once you got it, because you can always say, I have the other purpose. I'm going to build a new school fund or whatever.
I think we can only keep a certain percentage of the money for people rich. I remember correctly the conversation.
On the dual fund,
Overage.
as long as you have in the
The general
future
fund.
that you're going to
That would go into
build
that.
a new school, when you have the purpose there. So now that you've spent, let's say 2.8 out of 3 million or whatever the number is out of the fire and life safety, you can still keep that because you have a second purpose you haven't decided
I
yet.
think our thought, we've always, the last 2 years that I've been here, the thought was with our parents, we've always get that money as it just in case it go up.
Well, it may be, but I'm saying there's 200,000 that the voters have already given, that it may be in, good community interest to say, gee, we've looked around, we're just not tithing you for $1.8 million if we think we can contribute some existing funds you've already paid taxes
I
on
get what
before
you're
as
saying,
a
I just
sales
don't
job.
think we're stockpiling money.
Oh, no, I don't think you are. I'm just saying there's 75 grand you need the town to approve, the voters, that the school board doesn't even have the ability to use, but it's specifically for an expansion. So I'm just bringing up the thought, you may have some money to put into the kitty that may be useful politically as well as reducing the burden on the taxpayer.
Mike, let me ask you just a procedural thing. In most instances I've worked at, a committee will bring something to the school board, then the school board will actually put the figure to it, and it's not the committee that does it. And I think putting these individuals in a room and saying, hey, let's put 1.2 million out there, I think that's a lot on us in this committee. I thought our task was to put facilities out there, and I agree that this is probably the best scenario to get work going forth, but I think that needs to be a decision that goes through the school board, and it's talked out, because that's going to be the school board's warrant. It's not the facilities committee's warrant. So that really needs to be established, and that's just my thinking. So we can throw any number out here, but that's really got to jive with you guys at the school board level to say, this is what we're going to present, and how are we going to go about that? And
So
I think-
technically, we're only an advisor to the school board. We're a subcommittee of the school board, and they're the ones who have to own
But
the
we can
decision.
advise on,
Oh, sure.
we can just say that we think that this particular process might be helpful in
Correct.
terms of moving.
Absolutely.
Right, to go with a bond now.
Yeah, but it's a fair point, Chris. The reason why I brought it up here is because we have a lot of smart people around this table, and this hasn't been done in the town before. We are an advisory board. We don't make the decision, but we've got a lot of shared experience from all walks of life here, and I just thought if we had some ideas on how to structure this, I think it would be beneficial to the school board. But they will ultimately, they'll ultimately have to put the number on it, but they're not, I don't think we have any builders or engineers or people who've been through projects before on the, other than, Nate has some experience with it, but that was sort of my thinking, Chris. I do understand your point, though.
Well, and I agree with Chris, from a dollar perspective, if the school board is talking with the architects and trying to get estimates for civil engineering, then you're gonna have a number. Whether it's 3 million, 2 million, or 1 million, you're also gonna have to decide on a number that you wanna float for the warrant article, which doesn't have to be 100%. I think certainly a good faith or a discount or whatever that says a good portion of the money's there, we could move forward.
Yeah.
If the town, I think taking a trial vote in March, okay, to say if people aren't gonna approve $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever it turns out to be bonded so that we can get a plan that we all agree on, then I don't think you're gonna really get a great vote on building the thing, so it's a good trial balloon. And so I think that has some validity to it. I think getting 6 months to 9 months ahead of whatever we're gonna do is a great thing as well. And the last thing I could think of in structuring contracts, and I used to do a lot of that stuff, is there's no guarantee that all that money is going to be used. We have to hold the school board responsible to be able to say, well, thanks for the $1.6 million. The past 2 times, that money was used to create a design that the voters didn't vote on that money for design. They voted on money to give to the school board, and the school board used money to ask for their own design. I don't remember we ever asked to pay for architects' fees or anything like that. The money that was spent, whether it's $500,000 or $1 million on prior plans, was not voted on by the townspeople.
It wasn't voted on. It was all the first phase, sort of the first phase.
And so
there's not only the element, and so I was here for both of the last 2 votes, and, some of the discussion or skepticism was around, are these the right cost figures? I mean, so I think that's another benefit of having full designs, in addition to saving time. So sort of in addition to the, what number do you put on it? And I think it may be a proper structure, maybe up to, and maybe guarantee was the wrong word. What I was trying to convey was that Banwell will get a substantial portion of a design fee, if this passes, because they're gonna do the work on the design. But it may be the best way to structure it would be, at 6% up to X amount, and in the X amount is that's how it is worded in the warrant article. And So there's no, it's not like we voted this in, this is yours, you know. We haven't decided what we're gonna build yet, and nor have we put a cost on it. When we do, this will be the structure. This will be, you know,
Except for that's one of my questions.
yeah.
They, let's say this passes, and so we have this contract with them, it passes, they make these plans, then those plans are ours, right?
Yep,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, I- Because well, I don't know, I'm hoping that this would serve a couple of different purposes. One is that there's a commitment to this plan, you know, so say this first bond passes and we have these design, so we can continue the process and we get these sort of high-level plans out of it. So then we put it on a bond in March of 2017, and let's say it doesn't pass, you know, that it narrowly misses, because how can we get much more narrow than we already have?
No, you can.
Well, then, that I hope that kind of the message we're sending is that by doing this, is that we've got a commitment to this. So it doesn't pass, and this is what I said at that, immediately after the last vote. That's nice, we're not going back to the drawing board. Here it is, because we already own this, and we paid a lot of money for this, and so let's keep trying, let's educate for another year, let's, you know, talk through as to why this is it, and then put the bond on again. And towns that have successfully passed building bonds, in my experience, my knowledge, that's what it takes. You gotta keep throwing, you gotta commit, here it is, nope, didn't pass, here it is next year, and
But
you
you
do
gotta-
work in the year, but
gotta get it in the
that
strike
that's
zone,
the
though.
message that we're sending by doing this as well, I think, which,
Well, I think
to our
one of the
benefit.
reasons, one of the things that I support about this is that for me, there are three legs to the stool. One is, we need to have a good sense as to what this will cost, and I think that doing this process helps us, and we can be very specific about that, and that helps when we take this to, you know, to the larger, maybe a March 2017 vote. And if you can defend those costs to the doorknob, as you said, I think that that's valuable, and that's valuable and convincing. The second leg of this stool is community engagement, and it's not just community education, it's community engagement. This gives us time to say, look, we are not going to push something at you and say up or down. We're going to say, look, we've got a couple of options here. What does the community want to vote on? And so that process itself, I think, is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And it's not a fait accompli, and it's just an up or down vote on March, you know, the first week in March. And I think that that's important. The final thing is that the design itself gets to be honed. And we are doing things, you know, spending an hour talking about wetlands. We get to do our due diligence, and we are leaving almost no stone unturned, which I think is really important, because then we are educated. We've thought about this quite extensively. We've looked at every single angle, at least that we're aware of. And so it's a very deliberate process, which I think is important to convincing taxpayers to go forward with this, because then they can put their trust in this process.
To one of your points, and Russ brought it up at the last meeting, was that it's not, you know, a key component of it, and this goes to my practical consideration of how do we word the warrant article, or how do we advise maybe the school board, that there is a notion in the warrant article that we don't go forward with a final design until there's been a full opportunity for public input, you know,
Absolutely.
you know,
And it's a performance bond type of structure. I mean, you know, if you sat back and we already have the calendars, and what you said was spot on, okay? I mean, if we're gonna approve this in March, okay, then we can all sit down and do our due diligence as a facilities committee in preparation of that, but in theory, we're not gonna be able to spend a lot of money between now and March. So if you say it gets approved in March, then between March and June, I'll just make up dates, you want to say, okay, here are the high concept drawings that we've been working on, this is the best shot, there's 3 of them out there, let's engage the public, get their thoughts, and see if at least we can eliminate one of them or 2 of them, or everybody's excited about one, everybody's throwing up, okay? And then between, you know, June, but you'd want to have the school board say, I'm not spending the whole $1.6 million by June. I'm spending a couple of $100,000 on the next phase of this, which is conceptual drawings. We you don't want to promise in the warrant article, but if you say, the school board's responsible to walk us through this process, to get public input, to spend the money, we're asking you for the approval based on this, sequence of general plans, public input, better refined plans, and then to me, it makes all the sense in the world to have something and to bond it.
So what do you need from us? Because I know we have to have a warrant by January for it to get out there.
Yeah, but we have to have it to the budget committee here, it's sort of a number in the next couple of weeks, so that's why I'm engaging this, because we'll meet tomorrow as a school board and discuss this a little bit more. And look, we're sort of building the plane a little bit and flying it here, because Ingrid's working on the numbers. Ingrid's working on the numbers too, so,
I think language.
Has she done this, has
is-
Banwell done this before successfully?
I don't believe that Banwell has.
I know other architects.
Yeah, when we went through the interviews, I think it was CMK that had done it, Chip Kraus, and Frank may have.
Once.
In my discussions with Ingrid, it didn't seem so.
Yep.
I mean, she didn't,
Mike, when you're saying
Yeah.
working on the numbers, what do you mean by that?
we not only would need an estimate for what the fee would be for the architect, it's,
Yep.
for civil engineers and whatnot, because if, you come up, and Jim touched upon it tonight, what's your drainage plan? It may be very simple if we stay on the existing lot. There may not be a lot of work done, but we don't know that yet. And so when I say we're building it and flying it, if we were that far along,
You're
right?
talking about their fees, correct?
What's that?
The architectural fees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and civil.
Yeah, but how do we come up with architectural fees when really the options are out there is renovate the elementary school, either renovate addition to the high school, or build a new, junior high school. I mean, those numbers are significantly.
They're gonna be very different. That's why I
Yeah.
say maybe, we have to pick a number within reason and say an up to amount, not to exceed, a certain
Well,
amount. And, with Russ's caveat that, we would have this anyways, the school board has the oversight.
You're not gonna, you have to go this as you go along. There's gotta be trust built up on everybody's side, these are not rational numbers, but just for the hell of it, if that's an okay word to use these days, it's politically correct. People have kicked around $15 to $25 million as a range of at least doing something, okay? This is gonna pay for new buildings for everybody, no, but it would probably pay for a good deal of renovation. If you use that as a starting point, saying, let's figure out the fee on that, and say there's at least that much there. If everybody goes through the process and says, let's build a new school for $40 million and we'll vote to bond it, then the next push through is gonna have all the money you're ever gonna need to do that, because you have the town behind you. So I wouldn't say 3 million, that's 6% of 40 million. I would bring something in the 15 to 25 million that everybody knows they're gonna get. If they do the work, they'll get paid, okay? And if it's more likely renovation or some combination of that, there's enough to take care of that today. And if it gets beyond that, because you got a great thought and everybody can get behind it, then everybody should vote for that extra money in the future. And you make the school board responsible not to spend the money until they get people's input, to a sufficient degree. And it strikes me as a reasonable deal.
Is there an opportunity again, I'd love to take a look at some contracts or structure in terms of what happened with other companies that have done this, but is in that kind of scenario that Russ just gave, if we, have an up to figure that for the low end of what we have imagined here, and then we go through this, and that gets approved, and then we go through this process, and in the end, what we decide to build is a $45 million new school and renovate the elementary school. Is there an opportunity in that second bond for Banwell to get additional fees paid, or are we asking them to commit, or would we be asking them to commit to, this is all you're getting, no matter what? I mean, I guess that's,
Well, I
I'm
mean-
just trying to mitigate, sort of think about the risk from their point of view as well as ours.
Oh, you want another structure? I'll give you another structure.
It's an open question. I mean, what we're kind of talking about right here is a flat fee almost. Not
Right.
really, because it's not set at a particular number.
But are the architects the ones who are estimating cost? Or is that the civil engineers? I mean,
Architects won't estimate the cost. They can give you rough estimates within millions and maybe half millions, but, I mean, you would typically hire a cost estimator once you got your.
that's fine, but, you know, when you talk about performance, contracts are like an open canvas. Okay, you can put anything in, you just gotta get two people to sign it, and hopefully the lawyers to agree. You can have performance bonds, you know, it would, and I'm not suggesting this, but, you know, you can have a bond that says, okay, we'll pay you your fee, but we want a cost estimate, and we want that cost estimate, since we're gonna build it within a year, to be within 5 or 8% of what you said. Because why would we spend $1.5 million on you to find out the project you told us was gonna cost $20 million and cost $35 million by the time we got finished with it? So we're not gonna give you all your money until we get the bids in, and the bids end up turning into what you suggested we would pay, and not twice as much. And everybody's at risk there. So you're saying you get half your fee up front for designing it and giving us an estimate, and you get the other 50% of your fee when we get the bids for the contract in. And I'm holding you to making a good cost estimate and not blowing smoke at me. Okay? I mean, you can put all kinds of structures in. I'm not suggesting you do that, but just to get you thinking, anything you want, you can put in a contract.
No, I understand that, but I'm not sure that you're understanding, or, like, my question, and then again, we're trying to, will not be the one writing the contract, I'm out. But I'm just curious that in the past, is that a checks and balances, is that a possible checks and balances of, that people have used before successfully in this, that they do get a huge chunk of the opportunity to spend a huge chunk of the design fees through this first bond, but that it doesn't necessarily mean for them that it's capped? Because I think I'm a little bit worried about the other end too, that if, you know, they sign this contract with us, that they can only get up to X amount of dollars, and X amount of dollars is what they would normally get for the low end of what we're looking at, then there's not, I feel like it might close off some, not being very articulate here, it might close off their thinking in terms of other plans which the community might be amenable to, because they're limiting kind of what they're designing to this dollar amount.
I've done some research on this, and I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I do. There's a sliding scale.
Right.
The more expensive a project is, the less your percentage fee is, you know, because it doesn't take you that much more to, you know, build a $200 million project than you know, I mean, proportionally. So, I think I understand what you're saying is if Banwell's fee, the potential fee assigned to them in this warrant article is less than what they would get on the actual project, are we, you know, leaving them out to dry? There's a couple things there. This stuff is self-policing. First of all, the school board and us as advisory are gonna, I think, keep things within reason, because I think we have an idea of what, you know, might and might not fly, and we're gonna certainly hear that during public input. But I'll go back to the point, is that, you know, Banwell, there's not a lot of schoolwork going on right now. There isn't, because of the lack of school funding. So this is a good deal for them, potentially, to have, and I won't use the word guarantee, what's another word? A high likelihood of a substantial fee.
High level of confidence.
High, you know, going forward, you know, versus waiting on a project that may or may not ever pass. Who knows? I mean, I'd like to think so, but we don't know. and they don't know, but in all events, it wouldn't pass until 17, and so they'd be waiting yet a whole nother year and have to ramp up again, so.
But you're not looking at this as a cap, which I thought was your question. You didn't want to give up the opportunity that if people wanted to do more than the minimum or the middle ground, that you didn't want Banwell to be limited in the fee they would get, saying, and that's fine. I think all you'd be doing if you structured the warrant article property is saying the school board has the authorization to spend up to this amount of money on architect and civil engineering fees. And even if it's based on a contract, like Mike said, that said, it's 6% if it's under 10 million, and it's, 5% if it's over 20 million, whatever that is, and take the 1 point, either it turns out to be $700,000 based on that, or it turns out to be 2.3 million, of which you can pay $1.6 million now, and we're halfway there, so you should put in the work, and we should be able to pay you the rest of the money we owe you when we get the larger bonding.
And also to your point, Anna, there's nothing would prevent another warrant article vote in 2017 for whatever you think is reasonable. I mean, you could, I don't envision that happening here.
We're just asking the resources to go forward. We're not capping them. We're not saying that this is the upward limit of the bond for 2016 that we would be requesting, but not of Banwell fees.
Right.
Is
Yes.
that?
Yes.
This is the most you can hope for if the process continues this year.
I mean, Mike, they should be reasonable, because initially we discussed their initial fee for this, and, they agreed, then we had some talk, and they said, but if this drags on, of course there'd be additional costs.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I don't want to beat this horse to death, it's getting late, but the other sort of, I guess, the practical thing is, and, if you, from a voter's point of view, is that, come March, well, you guys don't even have you're not even settled on a finished design, why are we talking about doing this,
To the voters?
We can say design options. We want to give, that's really, we want to give voters design options before we put this.
We want to get their feedback and buy-in, through the process.
Yeah.
I think there will be a bigger education piece for this, and just in terms of the general public understanding what it is we are bonding, because
Yeah.
I think some people will be like, oh, look at that, and they want a 1.7 million at school, great. We're not that good, yeah, right. And other people will, at the other end, will say, what do you mean, you're another, didn't school board already approve $20,000 or whatever it was, why do we need a couple million?
I think the way that's addressed, I guess, is what we've already talked about, is that, there's something in the warrant article that, we don't move forward with a final design until we've had that input. Maybe that allays that concern, and obviously our good work between now and then, and the more due diligence and things like we did tonight, I think just it builds confidence that, this isn't a runaway process, or that, or a back room process.
I think that, given where we are, we have they're just being practical, we don't have many choices at this particular juncture. I think that we have to, this is one of the few options that we have, December 2nd, 2015 going forward, and I think it's a realistic one, and I think it's reasonable. And it's really about the only place to go at this particular point.
Okay, so the final, if everybody's said all they want on that, let's move forward. So the final thing is scheduling for the rest of December. I'm gonna take my calendar out, and as I'm just sort of looking back, I think I have a meeting every day, literally, this month. But the school board meeting is on the 17th, and what I'm hopeful to do is have the ed specs wrapped up and have us all comfortable with the space needs by then, because we need, as Ingrid mentioned last time, we really need to have that, shored up, and the school board needs to check off on it and be comfortable with it, so she can really, we can start narrowing things down here. And I know that Chris and Sean that last time were mentioned, they were working on they're gonna take a look at Ingrid's program document and then work it down. So maybe you can discuss timeframe and when maybe we'd be able to meet to sort of look at that and come to some conclusions.
Well, we're meeting with Banwell when? Yeah, but that's the 16th, right?
Yep.
That's gonna be on the 16th,
Okay.
yeah, and
We have a meeting with
Me
them on the
meaning the
16th?
facilities committee, or you meeting the principals?
No, facilities.
Facilities on the
I have that in my
16th.
schedule, too.
I thought it was the 8th, no?
Well, it was the 16th if we thought the 16th was useful.
Because I thought they were coming back with additional plans. Weren't they gonna do something,
They're gonna come back, yeah,
12 setup and then a,
If you're not gonna do something on till the 17th on the school board, that would impact what Banwell's gonna say on the 16th. Then I'd say, let's put this into January and let the school board, run with it. It seems the Warren article is the biggest issue. And getting the ed specs so you can, let's get the new piece of land detailed enough so Ingrid at least has a map of where she can get wet or not get wet, and let's get the education specs filled, which we don't have much input to, other than saying, thank you for doing all that work to fire, Ingrid's engine. I'm not sure if we have a lot to decide on between now and the 16th, that's great, but I don't know if we do.
well, the idea, I think, is, as Ingrid told us last time, is that we need to get that, when I say we, it's really the school board, but we need to, I think it's important for us to vet that first as a group, and be comfortable with it, and be able to just, to say why that is, and then give it to the school board. And Chris and Sean, you can maybe tell us how close we are to.
I think the only thing I've been running through that list of proposed building space, I think the biggest question mark for me is, are we going with a 612 building or a K6? Because when I'm looking at it going, well, yeah, I would need that space, and I probably need additional space if the sixth grade's gonna be down here as well. So that's kind of, I'm murky with that, but all the other things I pretty much have run through and say, yeah, that'd be nice to have, but it isn't a must. Or, yeah, I gotta have a bigger nurse's office.
Right.
There's a couple no-brainers.
Get the assistant principal out of a cubicle.
I thought we were going ahead with a K through 6. No?
No.
I didn't.
I didn't feel we'd made that decision.
No, we haven't made that decision, so I was gonna, Chris, you and I talked about it a little bit. And so what we may wanna do is have them both, what would the changes be, or the ed specs for both? But I don't wanna overburden these guys if it's a major undertaking, with an unreasonable timeframe. So I think we need to look at both.
Can you and I set some time aside next week?
Yeah.
So Sean and I will try, it's sitting without being interrupted, which is tough in the work that we do.
Yeah.
But it's a good day process of putting the numbers in and then changing them based on what it is. It's really just us sitting down in a room. So we'll schedule something out. What's that?
Would you need more time?
If we can get a
I think
day-
it's really important.
We
Yeah.
can meet next week.
If we can schedule some time in our day next week to do that, I think we could be prepared for the 16th. So it all depends if we can hammer that out. If we get that time, I think I'd feel confident for the 16th.
The other thing, I had just a question, because part of that was contingent on, I don't know whether it was contingent, but it seems like a piece of a K through 6 building proposal was actually the acquisition of new land. And that may be something we should think about in terms of asking for resources as well from taxpayers. I don't know whether that's presumptuous, I don't know if that's putting the proverbial cart before the horse, but, I also noticed that there was another piece of property right in front of the elementary school that's also for sale, that just came on the market when I was dropping off the other day. So I don't,
Wasn't our conceptual drawings was not using any additional purchases?
No, one of the ones Ingrid had for us last week was using, it's called the McGrath property.
McGrath, yeah.
Yeah, one was having that, but the school board's dealing with that issue, yeah.
But getting preliminary, I'd love to have the space issue.
Yeah.
If it's gonna radically change the fact that we can fit a whole different building structure or playgrounds or whatever, then why are we wasting time and money on, gee, we have 6 land issues to figure out? Still, I'd rather have the land issues settle down on, and get people's approval for that than design, waste designs that we're gonna have to redo 3 weeks later when we announce we just required another 2 acres.
Okay, so on the ed specs,
Put us down for the 16th.
16th?
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe, so the idea that night was, I mean, we can move the meeting with Ingrid. What I don't want to do is, that discussion of ed specs and getting comfort with them is not their issue.
Right.
We're supposed to give it to them, and so if it's more efficient that we maybe move that meeting out, let's do it, with Banwell, because I don't want them just to sit here and twiddle their thumbs while we're talking about ed specs. And given that, and given, what we've talked about the Warren article, why don't you guys sleep on it and let me know what a reasonable amount of time is, because I know how busy it is for you if you need, I don't want you guys to
I'd
get
work
crunched.
better with that deadline. and
Okay.
Just say,
Okay.
if you give me more
Seriously.
time, then we'll keep pushing it out.
But those ed specs are gonna, assuming whatever input we could add to your ed specs, which I hope not much, that's what Ingrid needs for fuel to be able to really hone in on the core spaces and all that. In which case, saying, hey, you tell us, you give Ingrid that over the Christmas vacation, and we have a meeting in January to say Ingrid now has absorbed what you guys have said, and this is what it means.
And so our review, again, of the ed specs is akin to the review of the enrollment projections. We're not the experts, but we have brains, and we can put them to cross-examination, because again, looking forward, you're gonna have to explain to voters, this is what you need. And I trust Chris and Sean and Ann and all else and the staff who've worked on the ed specs, but as part of our due diligence, we need to be comfortable with it, And then, then that's really what, that's Ingrid's foundation. That's really what, and she's not there to really advise us on that. I mean, these things may be a little fluid, meaning, as the process rolls along, there may be some input from her, but that's really our charge, is to give those to her. So,
I think where
So
Ingrid
we
would have value
don't have a
added.
meeting on the 8th, is that what you're saying?
no, I mean, I don't know where that came up, because.
Just the
Well, it came
16th.
here. Next facility committee meeting with Banwell, Tuesday, December 8th.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's wrong.
Okay.
So,
We did the
yeah.
16th, the next Wednesday is the 23rd.
That ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. And then there's the 30th. But maybe the 6th of January is feasible, which is a Wednesday. Is that too far out?
I think we have the ed specs done, and I think that gives her a little more time to,
Worried
3
about the
weeks to
bond,
figure it out.
yeah.
With holidays.
with holidays, take out a week of the holidays.
The holidays, I mean, there's, I think we can take a little breath here, because we're not putting a final project on in March, right? So, I mean, we do want to keep it moving along, but what I'm looking forward, not the next meeting with Banwell, we need to get together, I think, first, after Chris and Sean
After
have
the 16th.
honed things up, and, and Ann, you had a good point about meeting at nights like this. I mean, I'm starting to lose it, admittedly.
I'm doing better this week.
Maybe
It's not 10 o'clock yet.
Yeah,
though.
no, maybe it's better to do something like a review of these things, which can be kind of tedious, on a Saturday.
Sure.
Right, in the morning. And
It's still
so,
not gonna happen until
Review
the
of the
second
ed
week in
specs.
January or so.
That meeting on the 16th, that's gonna happen, right?
Kindergarten
for
performance
Banwell?
that night.
No,
Is there a kindergarten performance that night,
meeting
16th?
on, we talking about ed specs on the 16th?
Starts at 6:15.
I guess, that's what I'm looking at.
Start time. So I'm
Okay.
just looking for a start time.
Oh, I don't know, Skip, because we haven't,
Yeah, I mean, I have to
we were
go.
gonna have a meeting with Banwell on the 16th.
I'll be late.
Right, I know.
Yeah, but I don't know, as we're gonna, Sean and Chris are gonna be, you have until the 16th to get those finalized, I guess, or get a draft done, and then.
So we push Banwell in, for us, into next year, other than specific conversations to nail down.
That's what I'm thinking, but I'm just thinking about in terms of a next meeting that we could meet to discuss those, because if, we gotta need a couple of days to read through them, right, and to think about them. I'd hate to, I don't wanna get them at the meeting and be going through them, that's not gonna be very effective.
So Mike, if we get the ed specs done, and maybe Banwell doesn't need to be here on the 16th, and since we have that date, everyone has that date already, that's a time to look at the ed specs?
We could, as long as we have them a little in advance, and again, I don't wanna put you guys in a bind.
Well, we gotta get the work done, so
Yeah.
let's just shoot, you guys will have them before the 16th, a couple of days ahead of time.
Yeah. just
So
say,
we
like,
can discuss them on the 16th,
Hammer
because
out most of it by the
A
9th.
I think you're
Friday
gonna
at
want
the
that,
latest
yeah.
Monday, so we have at least
Yeah.
2 days. to-
48 hours is great for me.
Okay. I mean, because we've already kinda seen them before, it's not gonna be major.
Right,
major
so
changes.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
Okay.
meeting on the 16th at 6:30 or 7? Start time.
Is everybody fine with 6:30 on the 16th?
I'll be late.
That's where I was, Mark. That's what I was trying to get to.
There's a kindergarten performance that night, so
Okay.
I'll be late, but I'll come as soon as it's over.
Well, let's call it 6:30 then.
6:30.
So we'll get you the ed specs by Friday, the Friday before, the 11th.
And do you think I don't know if the school board wants it or not, but to the extent that you have a structural warrant article drafted, you may want to share with us or get our opinions on. That would be useful then. If it isn't, it isn't.
No, I'd appreciate your input again. There's no monopoly on thoughts here.
And the structure doesn't need numbers. It could just have blank spaces for numbers, but I think the structure is just as important as the process.
What's the due date for the warrant articles to be written? I know it's in January.
Yeah,
January.
22nd
Yeah,
or
it's
something like that.
mid-January.
For them to be written, but I'm
To
more
move it.
immediately concerned with getting it to
Yeah,
the
Friday the
budget committee.
22nd, they have to be in by.
Okay.
Well, the budget committee usually needs it a few days before
Before
the
that.
warrant
Right.
article. Well, last
Or the
year it
26th.
was about 7 minutes before the warrant article was due. Hopefully they can schedule it better.
Great. That's all I had for tonight is, unless anybody has anything else, let's adjourn. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.